It's the week of April 13th, 2017, and you are listening to the Pioneer GrowingPoint Agronomy Podcast. Today we discuss last-minute planting preparation. I'm your co-host, DuPont Pioneer Field Agronomist Josh Shofner. With me is DuPont Pioneer Field Agronomist Brian Buck. This is episode 6 of 2017. Welcome back, listeners. Well, Brian, we're just past the crop insurance date for corn in southeast Minnesota, but the big question is, are we ready to go?
Yeah, I think that's a common question we get, or we always get the call as soon as it is go time here. And looking at the past couple years, and looking at this year, I think one thing to call out is it's been a little cool and it's been a little wet so far. Where if you look at last year, for example, we had pretty warm and pretty fit soils early on. So I think when we get that question or we get that call right now, the biggest thing for me is your soil fit and has it warmed up at all yet?
Yeah, and that's really all I really consider when I get that call from a grower is it too early to plant or should I be planting or not? I really base it on the ground conditions, and if the ground is truly fit, my answer is always going to be that you should plant corn regardless of the calendar as long as you're past insurance date. And, the last couple of years, Brian, like you said, we've kind of been there. This year, there's maybe a little bit of corn in the ground here and there across southeast Minnesota, but for the most part, everyone's sitting there waiting for the weather to improve here a little bit.
Yeah, looking at the forecast, it looks like it's going to be a little bit wet here through the end of the week and into Saturday, and then kind of off and on from there. Temp-wise, too, it's going to be a lot of mid-50s and mid-30s, so hopefully we can get that trend a little warmer and a little drier, and I think things will move pretty quick once that happens.
Yeah, looking at soil temps, Brian, still down there. I mean, some of these cool mornings, we're probably below, probably in the 30-degree range in some cases, how cold it could be. And then we're warming up in the afternoon. I've seen some maybe mid to upper 40s is about as high as I've seen. What are you seeing, Brian?
Yeah, same things I've seen. I saw one, I think, yesterday of 45 degrees at 2 inches at 3 in the afternoon. But when you start looking at that, 45 degrees at the warmest part of the day is, not perfect either. So hopefully we can get the temp a little warmer and get it a little drier. Soils aren't saturated in most areas, so it shouldn't take too long to dry them out as long as we don't get too much rainfall over the next week here.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Brian, looking at some last minute planted things, I always like to think about what are the most common things we see after planting that could be a challenge for growers, and planting depth being one thing that we run into quite a bit. We talk about planting depth in some other shows, but it's something that you only get one chance to get it right. Once the corn planter leaves the field, your depth is what it is, and usually the things we run into, Brian, is shallow planting being more of an issue than being too deep.
Yeah, always a good call out right before planting starts is just how deep are you planting. That can change so much from field to field, or maybe even within soil types within the field. Especially, I think a good scenario I see sometimes, or not a great scenario, but a scenario I see sometimes is if you go out and till a little bit wetter soil, it gets a little more cloddy. That can ride your gauge wheels up, and then you're not planting quite as deep as maybe you'd like to. So field to field soil conditions, can change quite a bit, and I think it's really good. Every field you get in, check it. We want to be at that 2 inches, and just make sure you're down there as you get going.
Yeah, and I think the other thing there, Brian, is just making sure you take a look at it field to field. You talked about conditions changing, and that certainly changes every field you go to, and just making sure you're checking that every day to make sure you keep that depth of 2 inches. And certainly don't just assume that last year's setting will be the same as this year either. Just make sure you take the time to take a good look at that. And I always think about that. You get one chance to get your seeding depth right. You get one chance to get your corn rootworm plan right. And those are two things that we don't want to make a mistake of when we're planting our corn. Brian, one other thing that we're starting to see, and certainly I've seen it driving around the countryside, is the cover crops are really starting to green up. And anytime you see that greening up and growing, it's probably a good time to get that under control.
Yeah, so especially the winter rye, I think, has really got green, and it's got a lot of growth on it. As it gets a little bit warmer, and you think about winter rye, it can go from that 6 inches and looking pretty nice out there to starting to head out and being pretty much impossible to kill pretty quick. So I know one thing I like to do, and Josh, maybe you've got some experience with it too, is I like to be proactive with it. I think right now is a great time to go out and eliminate the cover crop. You'll still get the benefits from it. The roots are there to increase soil structure, help with soil structure. And it's nice to give it a little time for that plant matter to decay before you actually go out and do tillage and planting for the year.
No, I couldn't agree more there, Brian. I think now is the perfect time to do it. And in most cases, it's just a good shot of glyphosate and water conditioner will take care of that. Pretty easy to control when it's young and this early. You just want to find in most cases, Brian, I like to look for a decent day. Looking at the forecast, depending on what the weather does, but come the weekend and into Monday, maybe some sunny conditions in the 50s, and those are some good days to get out there and get the cover crop under control. Because if we do get a stretch, Brian, where it stays wet, If we do get a window here, I think we just got to get it, because if we do stay in these on and off rain patterns, like you said, that's when this stuff can get out of control and get to a boot stage really fast and really become a challenge for us from a seed bed and from a standpoint of controlling it.
Yeah, and one other call out, when you're looking at your glyphosate rates, make sure to keep them up. It is a pretty durable grass plant, so don't think of it as like trying to kill foxtail. Make sure you keep your rates up and make sure you get it. It's a little cooler this time of year, and it's going to take a little bit more to get it than it probably would in, say, a midsummer foxtail when you're going after that.
Yep, and certainly adjust that rate based on the height of the cover crop. If that stuff's getting big, that's where you really want to get aggressive with it.
Yep. All right, Josh, one other topic here that's coming up, I think, quite a bit, and alfalfa stand assessment. So we've been out and looked at some alfalfa, and I know we have talked to quite a few people that have also looked at alfalfa, and what are you hearing overall?
Overall, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Some of the common themes we're starting to hear is some of the stands that are kind of towards the end of the run, maybe into that third or fourth year, are having a few more challenges coming through winter. The other thing we're running into, stands that, especially older stands that took a cutting late last fall, those seem to be the ones that are having the most challenges. And as we're out there evaluating crown health, seeing a fair amount, and in some cases considerable amount of discoloration.
Yeah, I'd agree with you 100%. So when everything I've looked at or been at, it's kind of your historic alfalfa management, where it's been managed ideally, that's where they've been a little better, and where it's not quite as ideal, it's been worse. So first, second year stands look pretty good in general. The ones that are struggling the most are later year stands, third, fourth year, like you said, and especially ones that were cut in that mid-September and on range, where they just didn't get the regrowth that they needed back to really be healthy over winter.
Yeah, and Brian, I did see a little bit of alfalfa getting seeded here kind of over the weekend before this last shot of rain. And I think it's always important, Brian, was we got a lot of growers that still got a lot of seeding of alfalfa to do, but seedbed preparation is the key to make that entire thing work.
Yep, and we've talked about it before. One of the best things you can do is go out. I like to do a cultivation pass, or just, whatever kind of final primary tillage you do, whether it's field cultivator, then come back with a cultipacker, seed, and come back with a cultipacker again. I think is one of the best ways to prepare a seed bed and seed it down.
Yeah, it's all about getting that really firm, and the Brilliant Roller does a lot of good things for you ahead or coming after that alfalfa seeding to make sure we get good seed to soil contact and get a good established stand overall. Brian, anything else we should cover? Anything you're into here the last few days as we really get kind of primed up to roll here?
I think if you do have that alfalfa, you try to get out and look at it. And, from the road, it might look a little bit green, but some of them, when you get out there, they are a little thin. So just analyze that, or contact your local sales rep also if you would like them to come out and help. But in general, I think when you get out in the field, make sure your planter's set right. Get off, check that planter depth like we talked about. And if you do have those cover crops, it is time to go get them. Yeah,
and one last thing in that alfalfa thing I'm going to throw in there is right now we're really trying to evaluate just crown health and how many, maybe live crowns we'll have per square foot. But as that alfalfa grows a little bit and we get it up to that 4 to 6 inch stage, then we can start talking about the stem counts and really taking a look at it. We're going to have enough there. So kind of we're still in phase 1 of evaluation, but really with this weather, Brian, some moisture and sunny days, we'll be into phase 2 of looking at overall stem counts here real soon.
Yeah, and when you think about those stem count numbers, at 55 stems per square foot, you're not giving up any yield. As it gets less than that, yield goes down, at a linear curve or a linear straight line. So 55 is ideal. If you're in that 45 to 55 range, though, that's usually a pretty good stand of alfalfa. And when you start to get below that, that's where you start to consider maybe rotating out.
You bet. Well, Brian, we did broadcast this podcast live over Periscope, something we're going to try to do each and every week, but certainly we do want to encourage listeners, don't be shy to tweet at us during these broadcasts if there's anything you want us to cover real time. Otherwise, Brian, it's always important where to find the podcast.
You can find it on Twitter. I am at FarmerBuck1.
And I am at Josh Shofner. You can also find it on YouTube using keyword either of our names followed by Pioneer.
And another great place to find it is podcast.pioneer.com. And once you're on there, you can subscribe via iTunes and have it directly come to your iTunes.
That's a wrap for episode 6 of 2017. This show is recorded from the Agronomy Bunker Studio in Zumbrota, Minnesota. It is produced by Brian Buck and Josh Shofner. This is a bi-weekly podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to tune in next time.